When I asked about bar work in Malta, the owner turned me down flat. Post-Brexit, she said. Fair enough, she knew the rules. But across the road, a delivery rider was doing his rounds. Different passport, different story entirely. And I started asking questions. All things Malta. When I was living in Malta, I started noticing something. The delivery driver dropping off my food on a scooter, not Maltese. The taxi driver taking me to the airport, not Maltese. The construction workers on the site at the end of my street, also not Maltese. And at first I thought, okay, that's just modern Europe. You see that everywhere, right? But the more time I spent on the island, the more I realised this wasn't just the normal flow of EU freedom of movement. No, something much more deliberate had happened. And most people, including a lot of the expats moving there, had absolutely no idea. Today, I want to talk about Malta's workforce, who's actually there, how they got there, what it's doing to the island, and what Malta is now doing to try and fix some of the problems it created for itself. And I'll be honest with you that this is one of the more sensitive topics I've covered. But if you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I won't shy away from what I think needs to be said. Let me start with a stat that genuinely surprised me when I first looked it up. In 2011, Malta's population was around 417,000 people. By 2023, it had risen to over 550,000. That's a 30% increase in just over a decade. Let's put that in perspective. Imagine England growing by 20 million people in 10 years. The infrastructure alone wouldn't be fit for purpose. Now imagine that happening on an island which is just 27 kilometres long. Roads that were already chaotic got worse. Rents that were already rising now went through the roof. Queues at government offices got longer, and the social fabric of certain towns, places that had felt distinctly Maltese for generations, started to change very visibly and very quickly. Now, some of that growth was EU nationals, of course, people like me, exercising freedom of movement, working remotely, relocating for lifestyle reasons and such like. That's a whole separate conversation, and one which I can cover in a separate video later. But a significant chunk of that growth was not from the EU. It was something different. It was the result of a deliberate government policy to import labour from outside the EU, what's technically called third country nationals, or TCNs. How that happened and why is where things get interesting. Now, before I go further, let me explain how the work permit system in Malta actually works, because there's a lot of confusion about this. If you're an EU citizen, you can live and work in Malta freely. No permit needed. That's standard EU freedom of movement. But if you're from outside the EU, so places like India, the Philippines, China, Australia, and yes, now the UK, wherever, you need what's called a single permit. This is a combined work and residence permit tied to a specific employer and a specific job. You can't just show up and take any job you like. An EU national can. They can just take a job at the local pub, but a TCN, no. Theoretically, the system is controlled. There are also premium fast-track routes for TCNs, the Key Employee Initiative and the newer Specialist Employee Initiative, which are designed for higher earners and genuinely skilled professionals. The Specialist Employee Initiative, which launched in 2024, requires a minimum salary of €25,000 a year and relevant qualifications. But the standard single permit, no salary floor. And that's the gap. The rules said you needed an employer, a job, and a permit. What the rules didn't adequately account for, and this is important, was the scale of recruitment agencies operating in certain countries, places like India, Nepal, the Philippines, who were processing thousands of applications, sometimes with very little oversight, and sometimes charging the workers themselves enormous fees just to get on a plane. And so why is this important? Because when you see a delivery driver on a scooter in Valletta and you think, how is that person here The answer isn't that the rules don't exist. The answer is that the rules weren't enforced tightly enough, at scale, fast enough. And I know what some of you are thinking, because I thought it too. Let me explain. When I was on holiday in Malta in 2023, I went into a bar in Bujiba and asked about some casual work, just out of curiosity. The owner heard my British accent and asked if I was legally resident in Malta. When I answered no, the lady immediately said, "Sorry, we can't employ British nationals anymore, not since Brexit." Fair enough, she knew the rules and she applied them. Kudos to her and no argument from me. But here's what struck me. Not too far away, I saw drivers dropping off supplies and food deliveries, many from India or the Philippines, whose route into working in Malta, at least on paper, was equally as complicated, just as it was for me being a TCN. So how does that actually work? The honest answer is this, in several different ways, and it's happening all at the same time. The most common way was through the recruitment agency pipeline. Agencies in certain Asian countries didn't just find workers. They found employers in Malta too, and packaged the whole application. They handled the permit, the paperwork, and submitted it. The employer got a worker who arrived ready to start. The agency got a payday, sometimes from the employer, sometimes from the worker, and sometimes from both. Malta's labour market test, which is Maltese first, EU second, non-EU third, still had to be satisfied on paper. But if you advertise a minimum wage delivery job and no local person applies, you tick the box and simply recruit from abroad. And the reality is Maltese citizens weren't queuing up for those jobs. And who could blame them? The wages being offered were often insulting. And so in many cases, the labour market test was actually applied and was therefore legitimate, just trivially easy to pass. Then there's the gig economy angle. Platform delivery and courier companies, and in Malta, Wolt and Bolt are the obvious examples, often classify their riders and drivers as self-employed contractors, not employees. More recently, at least in regard to Bolt, there has been a shift to recruiting drivers who are employed via registered agencies. But that aside, the gig economy at large creates genuine legal ambiguity about whether the employer-tied permit requirement even applies. Some of those drivers and riders had legitimate status. Others were operating in a grey area that, quite frankly, nobody was actively looking at. And at the far end of the spectrum, yes, some of it was deliberate. Some employers were paying cash and avoiding full social contributions, and in doing so, kept workers compliant through their legal vulnerability. The fact that the new 2026 reforms specifically require all salaries to be paid electronically tells you everything. You don't legislate against something that isn't happening. So it wasn't one thing, it was a pyramid from legitimate but barely tested recruitment at the top down to outright exploitation at the bottom. And because those layers blurred into each other, the whole system became very difficult to clean up. I want to pause here and tell you something about my own situation, because I think it adds some honest context. After Brexit, I lost my automatic right to live and work in EU countries as a British national. I'd lived in Norway for the best part of 17 years, from 1999 to 2016. And when I explored returning to Norway in 2023, I knew that I wouldn't qualify. Like before, my plan was to start a small self-employed service business. That doesn't meet Norway's criteria for a skilled work permit. Norway's system is strict and it applies consistently. I didn't even attempt the application because I understood the rules. What I did instead was pursue my Maltese citizenship through my mother, who was Maltese. I got that in summer 2023, and then by default, I became an EU national, which meant Norway became an option again. I'm telling you this not to make it about me, but because the contrast is striking. I, as a British citizen with years of European experience, couldn't easily get back into Norway without meeting serious criteria. Yet the system in Malta at its peak was allowing a volume of labour migration that the island simply wasn't equipped to absorb. That's not an attack on the workers. It's an observation about a system that was failing because it clearly wasn't calibrated properly. I started seeing one or two comments in a couple of my videos from Maltese locals who were clearly frustrated and sometimes directing that frustration at people like me, as if by making content about Malta, I was personally responsible for the overcrowding. I understand that frustration. Genuinely, I do. When the place you grew up in changes faster than you can process, you look for something or someone to blame. And honestly, some of that resentment is understandable. I get it. But, and this is important, a lot of it was misdirected, because here's the thing that often gets left out of this conversation. Many of the TCN workers who came to Malta weren't coming from a position of knowledge. Some of them had paid recruitment agencies thousands of euros just to secure the job offer and the permit. They arrived in debt. They were dependent on their employer for their legal status, and some unscrupulous landlords knew exactly how vulnerable that made them, renting rooms to 10 people at a time, knowing those tenants had almost no leverage to complain. These workers weren't the architects of the system that brought them there. They were in many cases being exploited by it. But that doesn't mean the pressure on the island isn't real, because it absolutely is. But the story is much more nuanced than just too many foreigners came. Now, here's where I'll give the Maltese government some credit, because something has shifted. Whether it's genuine policy reform or political pressure, Malta has introduced a series of measures in the last year or so that suggest it has at least partially acknowledged what went wrong. The most significant is the pre-departure course. From January 2026, every TCN applying for a single permit for the first time has to complete a mandatory pre-departure course before they can even board a plane. It covers basic English, Maltese culture and customs, workplace behaviour, and crucially, workers' rights. 2 modules, roughly 10 to 12 hours each, an assessment and a live online interview. Yes, it's pretty comprehensive. There's also a fee of €250. And from March 2026, Identita, Malta's Identity and Residence Authority, formally verifies that certificate as part of every work permit application. Employers found breaching workers' rights can now be disqualified from hiring TCM workers altogether, and salaries must now be paid electronically, so no more cash in hand. Then there's housing. All rental agreements in Malta must now be registered with the Housing Authority, and the fines for failing to do so range from €2,500 to €10,000. Unregistered leases are now legally void. This means that a landlord who doesn't register the rental agreement loses all rights to enforce that lease in court. And here's the detail I find most interesting. If a landlord refuses to register, the TCN tenant can now initiate that registration themselves. That directly removes the leverage that unscrupulous landlords held over vulnerable tenants. It's a small thing in isolation, but as part of a package, it shows genuine intent to tackle the situation head on. By the way, if you're planning a move to Malta, one of the biggest headaches is deciding which residency route applies to you. I've built a free tool that guides you through it and shows the permits, costs and requirements based on your answers. If you want to check it out, you can either scan the QR code or see the link in the description. Now, back to the episode. So are these new policies enough? Honestly, the reforms are real. This isn't just window dressing. The pre-departure course, the employer accountability measures, the rental registration rules, these are substantive changes that address specific documented problems. And so I'm not going to dismiss them. But here's the harder truth. The infrastructure damage is already done. The roads, lack of available and affordable housing, the pressure on water supplies, the social strain in certain communities, that doesn't reverse quickly. Malta built its recent economic growth on a labour model that the island couldn't physically sustain. And the people who bear the cost of that aren't the politicians who designed the policy. They're the Maltese residents who watch their neighbourhoods change, and in some cases, the TCN workers themselves, because they were exploited within a system that promised them something better. Malta has always been a crossroads. Phoenicians, Romans, Arabs, Normans, Knights, British, The island has absorbed wave after wave of outside influence throughout its entire history. That's not a weakness. It's arguably what makes Maltese culture so distinctive and resilient. But absorbing influence at a managed pace is very different from opening a tap fully and hoping for the best. The question going forward isn't whether Malta should have foreign workers. It will. It needs them. The question is whether the system now has enough guardrails to make that work with dignity for the local community and for the workers themselves. So to fully answer the question of is it enough, I think Malta is now actively trying harder with its new policies, and so only time will tell. It's getting there, but it still isn't quite there yet. So if you're thinking about moving to Malta, I want to be clear that nothing I've said today is meant to put you off. Malta is still a remarkable place. The climate, the history, the community, the quality of life when it's working well. I've experienced all of that firsthand. It will probably be my retirement home, a 50-50 split with Norway. But I think you deserve the full picture, not the highlight reel, not the horror story, the actual honest picture of a small island that grew very fast, made some mistakes, and is now trying to find its footing again. That's what this channel is for, to talk about the reality on the ground and not just the postcard perception. Thanks for watching. If you're visiting Malta this summer and you want to know about the best festivals and beaches, you may like my Malta Summer 2026 travel video next. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.